What is going on, guys? Welcome back. Today I'm continuing my review of Paperwork. I'm taking a look at Volume 2, Folded Billets by Scott Creasey. Now, just like I mentioned earlier, it's important that you guys understand that I have no disclosures. Nobody sent this to me to review, and this video is sponsored by nobody. That is right, by nobody. So you can rest assured that I'm going to give you guys my honest opinion about this material, and you can pick this up directly from the 1914 for $46. Kind of a steep price for this. Those of you who know me well know that I love mentalism with billets because it is about the purest form of mentalism that there is, other than propless mentalism, which is why most of the mentalism I perform is either with folded billets, business cards, or just propless. I'm not a fan of those, custom decks that you see out there that are very popular, that's trending on the Magic Cafe. I know a lot of people like them because it does all the work for you, but the problem with it is it doesn't look convincing. It looks like a trick deck from a mile away that doesn't exist in the real world, and your spectators are going to go home saying, oh yeah, well, he had a trick deck, that's what he used. But when you have somebody write something down on a little piece of paper, which they hold on to, or it's in sight the whole time, you read their mind right in front of them, or you have them draw something and you just, you're able to get a sense of what that is and you're able to duplicate it, they're not going to have any good explanation for that. It's going to look real, it's going to feel real, and that's really what I strive for, and so hopefully that's what you guys strive for as well. So I'm going to start out with giving you guys my impressions of this project, and then I'm going to go through what he teaches in detail, give you guys my thoughts, and then my rating at the end. So as you guys know, I am a fan of Scott Creasey's work, and I have studied almost everything he's put out. I think that he's an excellent mentalist, and he has contributed a massive amount of mentalism to the community. Although that said, he really doesn't have a lot of stuff published on folded billets. If you read his books, Minimalistic Metaphysical Mentalism Volume 1 and 2, there's nothing in there that has to do with folded billets, because most of the mentalism he performs is either with blank cardstock or business cards. And so it shouldn't surprise you that this volume is about half of the time as the first volume. The first volume was like 3 hours of paperwork, and then this second volume is only an hour and a half. It's about an hour and a half. I didn't like some of the advice he gave because I didn't think it was good advice. He states that you can use like any cardstock and that, any business cardstock, and I don't agree with that. I think that you need to look for cardstock that you can fold easily, because if not, then the folded billet's going to be working against you. I didn't like some of the switches that he teaches because they looked awkward to me, and I don't think that they're better than standard switches that exist. I felt that a lot of the routines that he goes over on this volume are not optimized, and the presentations are repetitive, because the presentation in most of these routines he goes over is, write down your birthday. He gives them a reading based on their birthday and their tarot number. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, and I know that Scott Creasey is a fan of the tarot number, but I know that you don't want to perform every single one of your routines doing the same revelation, the same presentation. And so I think that they could have come up with some better presentations than what was shown here. I also really felt kind of cheated that he only performed 3 out of the 5 routines. So he does studio performances with D. Christopher for 3 out of the 5 routines, and then the last 2 he doesn't even perform them. And so if you're going to perform some of the routines, perform all of them. And for many people, that's the reason why they even pick up these projects, is because they want to see the work done in real time to learn the timing and the choreography, and you're going to be missing out on that. So the last 2 routines, you might as well have just read them out of a book, really, because you're not going to be seeing those vital aspects that you would expect to see on a video, and you're paying $46 for this. You would hope that you could see that. So my impressions, my recommendation is that you just skip this project. I don't think it's worth it. I think you're going to learn bad habits, that you're going to invest your time into learning routines that are not optimized. You're not going to get anything out of the standard presentation he gives you for almost every single one of these. And ultimately, you're going to find that there's much better stuff out there. So my recommendation is really goes back to saying that you should just invest your time and money in Julian Losa's Billets for the Modern Mind Reader series, because I think that that is the best modern resource for billet work that is on video right now, is Julian Losa's 4 volumes of Billets for the Modern Mind Reader. They are excellent. The routines are optimized. They're interesting, and you're going to have so much material to work with and to perform for your spectators. Another good resource for you guys that are interested in really learning really from a book, I would say, is just pick up Switchcraft. I think Switchcraft has more than what you would need in it to learn lots of different switches, lots of routines. So that is another good resource that I would recommend that you guys check out. So let's take a look at what you can expect on this Paperwork Volume 2. And as I said, along the way, I'll give you my thoughts and just show you some different examples, because I got a couple of billets here because I actually performed some billet work this week. Scott Creasey starts out with going over what is a billet, and then he talks about like what are the different cardstocks that you should consider to do folded billet work, and he mentions that you can use any business cardstock. Now, I don't agree with that, because I think that some cardstock will work better than others. Scott Creasey then suggests that you buy the cardstock that's being sold by the 1914. I've never messed with it, but it's probably overpriced. My recommendation is that you try out a couple different cardstocks until you find the one that works for you. Personally, I like the cardstock that Julian Losa recommended in his Billets for the Modern Mind Reader Volume 1. I've been using it for the past couple of years, and I just have never gone back to anything else after that, because this works really well. Following that, Scott Creasey talks about the psychology of the billet switch, and then delves right into some billet switches. He talks about his workhorse switch, which is his handling of Anneman's classic switch. There's a reason why Anneman's switch is a classic of billet work. It's because, you know, it's reliable and it works really well. If you study any folded billet work from anyone, you will see that everyone has little subtleties and little nuances that they've added to it. One review I did recently was Mark Paul's masterclass review, and he had a really nice little touch on Anneman's switch that you may want to check that out. Following that, Scott Creasey goes over his versions of the unfold and refold switch, and he mentioned that the reason why he came up with his versions was because he had a hard time with the classic unfold switch and refold switch to make it look natural. Now, I don't have any issue with it, and I don't have any problem with it, but Scott Creasey said it didn't look natural in his hands, and so his versions that he came up with, I really didn't like it because it looks weird how the paper goes behind your hand like this for a second. That's his unfold switch, and then his refold switch, I really didn't like it at all because it looks like this. You close the billet and you turn your hand over to refold it. Nobody turns their hand over like that to fold a card. It's just not natural looking. So I would never use it. You probably won't use it either, which is again why I'm telling you that I think that the switches that he teaches you on this project, they're not really good. I just think that the more the more accepted versions of the billet switches are ones that you're really going to learn and use more than what he's teaching you on here. He goes into a switch that he calls the elimination switch, which I think it was just kind of silly because it's basically like an animate switch, and he immediately throws it away, throws it over his shoulder. I mean, nobody performs mentalism like that close up unless maybe you're on a stage. But the type of mentalism I perform with folded billets close up, I would never just throw them over my shoulder like that, like throwing them on the ground. I just wouldn't do that. I thought that his split elimination switch was an interesting idea, just because the idea that you're going to be taking two billets and in the act of splitting them, you've already switched one of them. I thought that was a good idea. I didn't think there was anything wrong with that. That's pretty much all the switches he goes over, and then he immediately goes into the routines. So we're going to take a look at the routines now. Let's take a look at the routines that you guys can expect to learn on here. And of course, I'm going to give you my feedback of each one. So the first routine that Scott Creasey goes over is his one-to-one reading. Now, in this routine, you're going to give the spectator a billet, have them write down a question. The mentalist takes it back, tries to get an impression of it, then gives it to them and tells them to put it in their pocket. Takes out another paper, writes down their impressions, gives that to them and tells them to put that in their pocket. And then he gives them a reading based on their question. And then when they go home, they can look and see what they wrote. So this routine actually really is feed on Billets routine. So the routine is exactly the same mechanics, exactly the same fortune cookie type of reading that you're going to leave your spectator with as feed on Billets routine called Asked Orion, which you can find in his book Orion. And the reason is because if you study it, you'll see that it's exactly the same folded billet routine. And Scott Creasey even uses the same fortune cookie type of reading that he gives them. And when I say fortune cookie, this was made popular, I think, by Peter Turner, the idea that you're writing something down, giving it to them and telling them to look at it when they get home. Read it when you get home, it'll make sense to you. And he used the exact same out that Feed on Billet put in his book. But I would recommend to you guys to really just check out Feed on Billet's effect, because there's more revelations, there's more subtleties and nuances, because he uses something that's called like the dot subtlety, which is awesome, an excellent idea, which you're not going to find in this version by Scott Creasey. And if you are interested, you can actually find the original routine that all of this is based off of in Switchcraft. I think it was called like the Pusillanimous Billet routine, something that you might want to check out. If you are interested in learning how to do like a one-on-one reading with a billet, again, I would refer you to check out Julian Losa's work in his Billets for the Modern Mind Reader. I think it was volume 4 where he introduced Zephyr, which was really a billet reading with just one billet. That was all you used, was one billet. They wrote something, they made like a drawing on the one billet. You took it back for a second and told them to hold out their hand. You gave it to them and you could immediately just read their mind. An incredible routine with just one billet and you end squeaky clean. I would recommend that to you guys. Another recommendation I would make to you guys from a review I did a couple of months ago was Justin Higgin's The Third Eye. And it uses the same exact concept with a folded billet. But the difference here is that the mechanics are a little bit different because the papers are immediately opened. I really like the structure of it. I thought it was very clever. The idea that your spectator is going to make a drawing and then you're going to take out a card, you're going to make a drawing, you give them yours, you take theirs, and you each try to get a sense of what the other person drew. And you could use that same structure that Justin Higgin goes over, and you can go in any direction you want. You could really turn it almost into like a mini Q&A if you want to. So I recommend those things to you guys to check out. Moving along to the next effect, Scott Creasey went over a name and place routine using folded billets. Now in this version, he's going to hand, the billets to the spectator. You could probably use multiple spectators if you want. He did this performance with D. Christopher, where you had him write the name and the place. He has the spectator mix up the billets so nobody knows which is which, and then he's going to hold them up and the spectator will eliminate one of the billets. So this actually stays true to, the actual format of name and place. One is eliminated and it's just thrown away. So if you're performing close-up mentalism, you're probably not going to perform this because you're not going to be throwing billets over your shoulder. This is like really more for like a parlor or stage performance. But the mentalist is going to try to get, they're going to try to get an impression of what's written, and then he's going to take out a billet, start to write down an impression, and then be like, oh no, I don't think so. Throw that away, take out another paper, write down their impression, then give that to the spectator. Only now does the mentalist open up the billet, the target, to see if they're right, and they say, oh yeah, I'm right. They read it out, then the spectator confirms. And then this one, of course, has to be thrown away, because if it's not, you're going to have a major discrepancy. And then the last piece of information is revealed as per your usual name and place routine. Now, some of you may like that, especially if you perform on stage. Myself, I do close-up mentalism, more like strolling mentalism. I would never use that. I don't like the structure of it, and it actually looks kind of transparent to me what's going on. Just watching the performance, I just kind of was like, oh God, that looks terrible. But that's my impressions and my recommendation if you're looking for a close-up name and place routine that just uses folded billets, where you don't have to worry about destroying a billet, you don't have to do a center tear, you don't have to burn any papers. My strongest recommendation is Julian Losa's version, which was called the Plate and Name, and that was on the 4th volume of Billets for the Modern Mind Reader. And the reason I really liked Julian Losa's version is because there's only 2 billets in play the whole time. And I really like the idea that the last piece of information, you can hand it to them. You can get your impression of the last piece, the one that was eliminated. You can hand that to them and say, here, you hold on to it. You can reveal it. They can open it up and see that that is the name, and the actual food that they wrote has been there. It's on the table where it's supposed to be. And so there are a number of switches involved, but they're not difficult. I actually performed the routine this past week and had some really strong success with it. And I would highly recommend it to you guys, because for me, it is the best name and place version that uses folded billets for close-up mentalism. But that's my advice to you guys. Moving along to the next routine, we have Acidus Lots from Little. And I felt that this was the best routine here on this volume. And this really is not really like folded billet work that has to do with switches and stuff. It really is folded billet work that just uses Acidus Novus. Now, for those of you that are interested, there's a variation of this that Scott Creasey published in his book, Structured Imagery, which was called Acidus Novus Variation from Home Invasion or something like that. And in that routine, you're going to be having a spectator write down a couple of pieces of information on a folded billet, and you're going to just hold it to your head for a second, get your impression, and then start revealing the information. And it was really clever, and I really liked it a lot in the book. And so I was pleasantly surprised to see this version here. Again, he's using concepts in the same presentation of the person writing down the season of that they were born, writing down the place that they were born, writing down their birthday, as well as their star sign. So that's what they write down on the card, and then you start revealing it. I did think it was clever that he combined the idea of Acidus Novus with like a center tear. I thought that was really clever. I think a lot of people would like it, and I think it was the best routine on this project. The next effect that Scott Creasey goes over but doesn't perform is the classic 3 billet test. Now, you're probably familiar with this effect, and in Scott Creasey's version, he gives 3 spectators 3 folded billets and has them write down their birthday. They're mixed up and dumped into the mentalist pocket, mixed around. The mentalist takes out one of the billets, is going to read it, and then is going to give the person a reading based on who it belongs to, and they're going to return it to them. And then in continuation, he's going to take out a second billet, and he's going to, give a cold reading to the person that it belongs to, and then he's going to open it up and he's going to identify and say, this is yours, your birthday is such and such. And then finally, the last birthday, who it belongs to, so he's just going to reveal the birthday, and that is the effect that he performs. Now, it looks and feels almost exactly like Chris Carter's 3 billet effect. You guys may remember that I went over Chris Carter's 3 billet effect when I did my review of his Penguin Live lecture. It was his first Penguin Live lecture, except Chris Carter's effect is superior to this in almost every way, even though the structure is similar, because it appears that Scott Creasey has borrowed some elements from Chris Carter, like mixing the billets in the pocket and the idea of how he gets one ahead. But the issue here is that Scott Creasey actually uses multiple switches And in Chris Carter's version, Chris Carter only uses one move in the very beginning. But in Scott Creasey's version, you have to use multiple switches and you have to remember some dates. So I don't know about you, but I'm going to tell you guys that I work a lot with people's birthdays because you guys have seen me calculate the day of the week of anyone's birthday. I can do it instantly without even trying because I've been doing it for over 10 years. But because of that, I work with people's birthdays all the time, and it's easy to forget someone's birthday, which is why I would highly recommend you just stay away from this 3-billet effect. And in fact, I would highly recommend you just go and learn Chris Carter's version. Chris Carter's version is superior in every way. The first reason is because there's only one move in the beginning and it's super easy. The second reason is because Chris Carter's version is very entertaining because he has each person write down the name of the first person they ever kissed. Those billets, again, they're mixed up. And then he has this idea of comedy that he introduces by telling them, I'm going to ask you guys each a question and you're going to answer no every time, no matter what. And so he asked them, like, did you kiss this person? Did you kiss this person? And it's funny and it builds up a lot of humor. And the reason why I think Chris Carter's version, the structure is better, is because the first piece of information, you open the billet, you read it, you go through this funny gag, and you return it to the right person. So you have a psychometric effect. The first effect is like a psychometry effect. Now, the next billet you take out, but you hand it to somebody else and you let them read it out loud. So if anybody was thinking that you were looking at the writing and that was giving you the information, now that idea is gone because you didn't even look at it, somebody else did. And finally, the last piece of information that's in your pocket, you don't even touch it. You know who it belongs to, but now you can give them that real mind reading experience where you can read their mind and tell them the name of that person. And because this is something really close and personable to each of these people, and because it's funny and it's very involving to everybody, it's just something that I could see everybody would use. And it's just so much better than Scott Creasey's version. I even question why he even put that on this project. You know, I just wonder that myself. But that's really my take on this effect. And again, I would highly recommend you guys check that out. You may even want to check out the review I did of Chris Carter's Penguin Live lecture. Finally, the last routine that Scott Creasey goes over is his Q&A with folded billets, which I think is fine. He teaches you two versions, a close-up version and a parlor version. And I think that those two routines, I think the Q&A with folded billets, I think it's an excellent effect. And I think that you would like it a lot. It's too bad he didn't actually perform it to show it to anyone. But I think that his idea of getting one ahead works just fine. If you are interested in Q&A with billets, there's a lot of resources out there. Again, if you've read Switchcraft, then you probably learned a very simple way of getting one ahead using the no gag, which works really well. I've done it myself, performing for a small group of nurses actually doing this type of routine. So I do think that that is helpful. I think some people will use that. And that's pretty much everything he goes over on this project. Now, here is my rating for this project, and you guys can see that I have rated this as 2.5 out of 5. So it's not a favorable rating. I think it's way overpriced. I think that for what you're paying for, you're really not getting a lot of value for it overall, because I don't think you're going to use like 4 out of the 5 routines or whatever. I don't think you're going to really use them, and I don't think that the switches are really good. So my, honest review here, my feedback is that I would recommend that you guys just nix this project and instead go with any number of other resources that are out there. It's hard to say, what is the absolute best out there, because there's so much that's out there. But in terms of the modern resources that exist, my highest recommendation goes to Julian Losa's work. And you guys can take my word for it because I perform with folded billets constantly. But anyway, if you think that I've left something out, just leave me a comment below. As usual, I hope that this has been helpful to you guys. This has been a requested review, and if you have anything that you really want me to review, send me an email, leave me a comment, because it may be something that I'm planning on reviewing anyway. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, I would urge you to subscribe to the channel. Thanks so much, guys, for tuning in, and I'll see you on the next review.